Welcome to the South Carolina Department of Education's Professional Learning Opportunity, PLO, Exploring Effective Phonics Instruction. This virtual self-study has been designed to help you begin or deepen your understanding of phonics and Tier 1 phonics instruction. This PLO has been designed as a virtual self-study to be completed by individual educators, grade level teams, or as the content of a school or district professional learning opportunity. A digital handout is included to help you plan your PLO based on the time available for your professional learning. You may choose to break this PLO into several sessions. Please take into account embedded videos and articles which will require additional time. These items are outlined in the digital handout for your convenience. Before beginning any professional learning opportunity, it is important to remind oneself of the importance of a growth mindset. The Standards for Professional Learning outline several ways that you can take ownership of your learning as you participate in this PLO. Take a moment to read the prerequisites for professional learning listed on this slide. During this PLO, participants will be exposed to research and instructional strategies in the areas of phonics. No picture can be complete without student data. So the outcome of this self-study will depend greatly on the needs of your student population. Let's begin this PLO by reminding ourselves of the profile of the South Carolina graduate. This profile is the vision that all students will graduate ready for college, careers, and citizenship. This vision will be accomplished through a multi-tiered system of support for all students. The South Carolina Department of Education, districts, and schools will work together to implement the South Carolina MTSS framework to utilize the most effective teaching and learning strategies that address the academic and social emotional needs of every child. Why a phonics professional learning opportunity? Nell Duke says, we have got to get phonics instruction right. The stakes are so high. Not only because the ability to read words is important to success in school and life, but also because there is so much to teach. We just cannot afford to spend the better of the school day on phonics. We need to be highly efficient and effective in teaching phonics so that we have as much time as possible to develop comprehension, composition, science knowledge, social studies knowledge, and so much else that is important to young children's development. Wiley Blevins says, countless research studies have been conducted on phonics instruction. Much of this research has focused on the usefulness of phonics instruction and the best ways to teach children about sound, spelling, relationships. Here is a list of 10 of the top research findings regarding phonics. I'm going to allow you time to read these 2 slides to yourself. Please continue reading this slide. The link to this article is on this slide and on your digital handout. What research tells us about reading instruction? Children differ from one another in their reading ability, as in their performance on other tasks. Researchers and educators cannot erase these differences, but research can improve our understanding of how written language works and of how children learn, and educators can use this information to design instruction. Better instruction will raise the level of all children, whether they are faster or slower learners. This slide provides you with an overview of the entire PLO. You might want to take each inquiry and work through them one at a time. The inquiries build upon each other, so it is recommended that you follow their sequential order. These are our learning targets for the entire PLO. Synthesize multiple phonics definitions to refine my understanding of phonics. Articulate why universal screeners and phonics assessments are important, and to know what phonics assessments to use and why. Synthesize multiple resources to determine evidence-based methods for effectively teaching phonics. Articulate the sequence of phonics instruction in my district school and recognizing any gaps. Articulate what students should be taught at each grade level, and what does a good phonics lesson look like. Hopefully, you have participated in the Phonological Awareness PLO. If not, you might want to complete it before beginning this PLO. If you did, let's just take a quick review. Phonological awareness is the recognition that oral language can be divided into smaller components, such as sentences into words, words into syllables, and ultimately into individual sounds. This recognition includes identifying and manipulating onsets and rhymes, as well as having an awareness of alliteration, rhyming, syllabication, and intonation. Being phonologically aware means hearing the difference between bat and pat, and between bat and bet. Developing a child's phonological awareness is an important part of developing a reader. Many research studies indicate that kids who have weak phonological awareness also have weak reading skills. Phonological awareness is an umbrella term that includes both awareness of words at the phoneme level and awareness of larger word units, such as syllables and onset and rhyme. Start with the largest unit and progress to smaller units. It is not essential to master one skill before moving on. The goal is to create an overall awareness of how words work. Session 1 contains 2 inquiries. Inquiry 1 is an inquiry into phonics, defining phonics, deepening understanding of phonics, and Inquiry 2 is an inquiry into phonics assessment. How do you use your universal screener to inform instructional decisions? The inquiry process is what we will use during each inquiry, and you will follow this process of immersion, investigation, coalescing, and going public. Beliefs are important. Working on developing common beliefs is the first step in creating a unified vision for the school. Also, without coherence in beliefs and in the practices that support those beliefs, there can be no consistent academic rigor. And that is taken from Regie Routman. So we will begin Inquiry 1. Let's start with thinking of your definition of phonics. Write down your definition of phonics. Then you will read the expert definitions that are on this slide and also on your digital handout. Find a definition that resonates with you and add a sticky to this one and note why it resonates with you. Have a discussion with others that selected the same quote. Share out your discussion, whole group. What questions do you have now about phonics? Write those questions down. Pause this recording and complete this activity. Choose a few texts of interest to read from the next slide and from the link on your digital handout. View videos, read and annotate the text, looking for new and interesting information about phonics. Jigsaw the articles on this slide. The links for the articles and the protocol are on this slide and on your digital handout. Share your findings with your partner or group and add any new learning to your phonics definition or to the answer your questions about phonics. Make a chart, like you see here, to share what you marked as important and why you think it is important and how this will impact your learning moving forward. After you have made your charts, hang them up so you can have a gallery walk to see each other's understandings. Then you will take some time to reflect on these questions individually, in partners, or small groups. Now pause your recording to complete this activity. So to conclude this inquiry, the difference between phonological awareness and phonics. While phonological awareness includes the awareness of speech sounds, syllables, and rhymes, phonics is the mapping of speech sounds, phonemes, to letters or letter patterns such as graphemes. Phonological awareness and phonics are therefore not the same, but these literacy focuses tend to overlap. As students learn to read and spell, they fine-tune their knowledge of the relationships between phonemes and graphemes in written language. As reading and spelling skills develop, focusing on phonemic awareness improves phonics knowledge, and focusing on phonics also improves phonemic awareness. This is the end of Inquiry 1. Inquiry 2. Inquiry into phonics assessment. How do you use your universal screener data to inform instructional decisions? Pause the recording to write your answers down to this question so you can refer to it during this inquiry. Share with a partner or small group. These screeners are for the districts to use to identify kindergarten through second grade students that may need more supportive instruction. Find your universal screener from this list. Let's look at the criteria for the universal screeners. In compliance with Act 213, the State Level Learning Disorders Task Force developed a list of improved universal screeners. The selected universal screeners contain the core components seen on this slide and located on page 23 of the South Carolina MTSS Framework and Guidance document. The link to the guidance document is on this slide. Multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS, is a framework designed to intensify instruction for students. While all students deserve quality Tier 1 instruction, some students will need additional layers of support. Universal screeners and other diagnostic assessments will help educators narrow the focus by uncovering critical areas that need special attention. This PLO will offer evidence-based practices and approaches to meet the varying needs of students. Looking again at the criteria for screeners, you can see the alphabetic principle appears in kindergarten and first grade, and phonics appears in first grade and second grade. What is the alphabetic principle? To understand what your universal screener is screening, we must understand the alphabetic principle. Pause this recording and take some time to click on the links on this slide and on your digital handout to explore the question, what is the alphabetic principle? After exploring the alphabetic principle, you now understand that the goal of phonics instruction is to help children learn the alphabetic principle. The idea that letters represent the sounds of spoken language and that there is an organized, logical, and predictable relationship between written letters and spoken sounds. Before moving on in this session, be sure everyone has access to your most recent Universal Screener data. Zone of proximal development. Vygotsky's definition of zone of proximal development, or some people call ZPD, is the distance between the actual development level as determined by independent problem solving and the level of potential development as determined through problem solving under adult guidance or in collaboration with more capable peers. The link on this slide is also on your digital handout if you want to read more about the zone of proximal development. When we look at student data, we need to analyze it to see what the student can already do on his or her own. This is what we call their ZAD, zone of actual development. They are independent at this stage. Then we look to see what they are ready to learn now with some assistance. They are in the ZPD, the zone of proximal development, where we need to teach so they can quickly move this learning to the ZAD. Lastly, we need to notice what is out of reach. They find it very hard and struggle with it. This is where we can begin nudging them towards understanding with a lot of support and explicit instruction. They will hopefully move to the ZPD and finally into ZAD with their understanding. There is a link to this form on this slide and your digital handout. So how do you use your Universal Screener data to inform instructional decisions? You're going to take time to dig in to your Universal Screener and your student data. Use the ZPD chart to record your noticings of what does it tell you about your students? What strengths do your students have? What gaps do you see in students? How can you use this data? What information does this data not give you? I want you to take some time and pause this recording, and there's a link to the form from the previous slide on your digital handout to start recording your observations of student strengths and gaps. You will then share with a partner and chart and share whole group. So session 1, learning targets recap. We synthesize multiple phonics definitions to refine understanding of phonics and articulate why universal screeners are important to use and why. This is the end of session 1. Session 2. We will continue with our inquiry into assessments. In Session 1, we discussed the universal screener and the data we can gather from it. Now we're going to think about why is phonics assessment important and what phonics assessments you use and why. The last inquiry will be looking into Tier 1 phonics instruction. What sequence of instruction does my district support? Are there gaps? What should students be taught at each grade level? And what does a good phonics lesson look like? Let's revisit our learning targets. I will let you read these to yourself since we have seen them multiple times. Today in Session 2, we will focus on looking at the phonics assessments you have and how they guide the instruction of Tier 1 phonics infused with research, supporting the need for intentionally teaching phonics and the sequence of teaching phonics. At the conclusion of the PLO, participants should be able to articulate all these targets. Just a reminder of the inquiry process. In Session 1, you looked at your universal screener data and answered the questions: what strengths do your students have? What gaps do you see in students? How can you use this data? What information does this data not give you? Did you notice that the data may not give you enough information? We may need to use other phonics assessments to dig deeper to find what the students can and cannot do. So inquiry 2, an inquiry into phonics assessment. Why is phonics assessment important? What phonics assessments do you use and why? I want you to pause this recording to write your answers to these 2 questions so you can refer to them during this inquiry, then share with a partner or small group. Why phonics assessment is important. The difference between screening and assessment. The purpose of screening is to determine whether a student needs assessment. The purpose of assessment is to gather the detailed information needed for a treatment plan or instructional plan that meets the individual needs of the student. Just like when you go to the doctor, he or she checks your blood pressure, that's your screener, and then if your blood pressure gives alarming results, more tests, diagnostic assessments, will be administered to find out the cause. In Session 1, you looked at your universal screener data. Were all the criteria assessed efficiently, or were there some gaps? Do you need more information to make informed instructional decisions for your students? What questions do you have about phonics assessment? Independently generate a list of phonics assessments used in your district or school that you believe are the most important for assessing phonics knowledge and you think are helpful. Share with a partner and chart, then share whole group. Then think about what are you wondering about phonics assessments and write this down. Pause the recording now. You will now take some time to look at your current phonics assessments and or choose a few assessments of interest to look at on the next slide, and they are also on your digital handout. View videos, read and annotate the text, looking for new and interesting information about diagnostic phonics assessments and your current phonics assessments. Make a chart, like on the slide, to share what you marked as important, why you think it's important, and how this will impact your learning moving forward. These are the links, which are also provided on your digital handout. And after you've made your charts, hang them up so you can have a gallery walk to see each other's understandings. Then take time to reflect on these questions. If you found any assessments you want to administer to your students, you might want to do this and revisit your ZPD chart where you were recording the Universal Screener data to assist you in future phonics instructional planning. Pause the recording now to take the time to look at your current phonics assessments and/or links provided. Assessment will lead you to the following key questions. What do assessment results tell me about each of my students? Which target skills and strategies can I identify? Which of my students need to work together as a group at this time? How much time is required per group? What resources are available for me? How do I organize the classroom and instructional time in order to manage differentiated instruction? These are the questions we need to ask ourselves after we have the assessment data and we know what students need. We must decide what is taught whole group, small group, and one-to-one. The classroom organization and class schedule are so important. This is the end of Inquiry 2. Inquiry 3, an inquiry into phonics Tier 1 instruction. What sequence of instruction does my district support? Are there gaps? What does a good phonics lesson look like? This inquiry will take a bit of time. You may want to begin with the first inquiry question about scope and sequence, and at another time have an inquiry into what good phonics lessons look like. These are two very important components of your phonics instruction. Let's begin by thinking about your scope and sequence for phonics instruction. Pause the recording and read, annotate, and discuss the article on this slide. Now you will have some time to immerse yourself in the scope and sequence links provided on the next slide and on your digital handout. Use the guided questions on the next slide as you look at the scope and sequence materials. If you already have a district school scope and sequence for phonics, take time to look at it and answer these questions, then compare to the scope and sequence examples or choose one to try if you do not have one. Make a chart, like you see on the slide, to share what you marked as important, why you think it's important, and how this will impact your teaching moving forward. Use the following questions for discussion. Do I know my basic phonics scope and sequence without looking? Does my instruction have a formal scope and sequence? How am I keeping track of what skills have been taught, when, and how many times to ensure review and repetition? Have I noticed specific skills that my students struggle to master? Your student data will help you answer these questions. As you can see, the link for scope and sequence materials are on this slide and also on your digital handout. Take time to reflect on these questions as well. If you found any assessments you want to administer to your students, you might want to do this and revisit your ZPD chart where you recorded the Universal Screener data to assist you in future phonics instructional planning. Pause the recording to take some time to look at the scope and sequence. Now you will continue Inquiry 3 by asking, what does a good phonics lesson look like? You have looked at data, scope and sequence. So what does the instruction look like in Tier 1? Pause the recording and independently generate 3 to 5 practices you believe are the most important Tier 1 phonics teaching practices all classroom teachers need to know, and write them down. Share with a partner or group and chart. You may pause the recording now. Eric Jensen states that based on brain research, teachers should teach in small chunks, process the learning, and then rest the brain. Too much content taught in too small of a time span means the brain cannot process it, so children simply don't learn it. Don't be drawn into a forced choice about word analysis. Ignore people who say that it is wrong to analyze a word out of context, or people who say that all children need is out of context phonics instruction. Research simply does not support either of those positions for beginning readers. And this comes from Letter Lessons and First Words, Phonics Foundations That Work by Heidi Mesmer. This slide shows how you can structure your instructional time for a focused phonics workshop. Breaking it into the structure with a mini lesson, time to work and practice, and then share time, but keeping it very short amount of time. This slide is a design for responsive literacy teaching from Fountas and Pinnell. It shows with the yellow dot opportunities for phonics word work instruction and phonics word work practice throughout the literacy day. Teaching foundational skills. Clay believed that children must take on comprehensive, well-established, and highly usable knowledge of foundational skills. Foundational skills are broadly defined by the CCSS as print concepts, phonological awareness, phonics, word recognition, and fluency. When planning phonics lessons, we must start with our standards. It is important that students demonstrate an understanding of the organization and basic features of print. Reading literary text and reading informational text standard 1 is important to beginning of phonics instruction. Concepts of print are important. If students are being taught phonics skills without them realizing how books work, the instruction is ineffective. Students need to learn phonics skills in order to decode and make sense of the books they want to read and write. If you are interested in reading more about concepts of print, click the link on this slide or on your digital handout. South Carolina Fundamentals of Reading. You can see that phonics is in the top box where it says integrate. Integrate an information cueing system that includes meaning, semantics, structure, which is syntax, visual, which is graphophonic, and pragmatics, which is schematic, to make meaning from text. Reading literary text and reading informational text standard 3 is crucial to lesson planning. Students need to know and apply grade level phonics and word analysis skills when decoding words, phonics. We must know what standards our students need in order to plan effective phonics lessons. Decoding is the process of reading words in text. When a child reads the words, "The ball is big," for example, it is necessary to understand what the letters are, the sounds made by each letter, and how they blend together to create words. In our standards, Writing Standard 5, if you look at 5.3 and 5.4, it is the encoding with spelling when writing. Encoding is the process of using letter sound knowledge to write. If a student were to write a sentence, instead of making sense of the letters in text, it is necessary to recall sounds and the symbols assigned to them to write the letters together to form words. The difference between decoding and encoding. With the teaching of letters and sounds, the skill known as phonological awareness develops. Children show their phonological skills when they are able to recognize and manipulate letter sounds in specific ways, like beginning, middle, and end sounds of words, words that sound the same, and syllables. This manipulation takes us to the final step in teaching reading, putting these concepts together to instruct children how to read words, or decoding. It requires children to process several steps. Recognize the letter, associate the sound of the letter, understand how the letter sounds work together to make words, blend the letter sounds together to create speech. You've probably forgotten how challenging this is to a reader in the earliest stages. Decoding a simple sentence, such as "she is happy," means that the child needs to know all the letters contained in the sentence, the sounds assigned to each letter, and the way we put these sounds together to read. The same process is not used when readers take this knowledge and write. Instead, they are encoding, somewhat reversing the process. Take a look at the steps. Understand how sounds work to form words. Take a word apart, sound by sound. Remember the letter that goes with the sound, including what the letter looks like. String or blend the letters together on paper to create words. When children are encoding, they are using the same skills in reading, but in a different process. If a student wanted to write, "she is happy," the first step is to be able to recognize and understand that the sounds made from those words are separate. Then it is necessary to break apart the words, the sounds, assign letters, remember rules, and write words. The value of multisensory approach teaching experience supports a multisensory instruction approach in the early grades to improve phonemic awareness, phonics, and reading comprehension skills. Multisensory instruction combines listening, speaking, reading, and a tactile or kinesthetic activity. We can all agree that multisensory instruction is a way of teaching that engages more than one sense at a time, using sight, hearing, movement, and touch gives kids more than one way to connect with what they are learning. Multisensory teaching engages multiple learning pathways, which is beneficial for all readers, yet critical for struggling readers. When a new skill is introduced using a multisensory approach, it is introduced in a way which simultaneously links visual, auditory, tactile, and kinesthetic pathways. The more senses involved, the more likely students retain and recall the information after practice and repetition. What about remote learning? We are still learning about remote learning. There's a lot to understand about how to reach our students and their parents when we are not face-to-face. You will find 3 links in this inquiry on a later slide. These are the guidelines sent out by the South Carolina State Department of Education in an April 2020 memo regarding instructional time when learning remotely. The suggested instructional periods include time needed for processing, practice, reading, research, and any other actions that may support the learning process. The guide includes suggested minimum and maximum minutes for instructional time and recommended lengths of sustained attention. As you enter into this inquiry, keep in mind your student data that you analyzed in Inquiry 2 and what your students need instructionally. You have some choices. You can take this time to look more closely at your phonics lessons, resources, program you currently use, especially if it's relatively new to you. The more familiar you are with the resources you have, the better you can utilize them. You can use the links provided in the next slide and on your digital handout. The links are divided into decoding, encoding, multisensory, and remote information. You can choose from all of the categories or stick to just one. That is up to you. Pause the recording and begin your inquiry into phonics instruction using your questions and the student data to guide your inquiry. Make a chart, like you see on this slide, to share what you marked as important, why you think it's important, and how this will impact your teaching moving forward. After you've made your charts, hang them up so you can have a gallery walk to see each other's understandings. Pause the recording and begin the inquiry, then reflect with these questions after your group has shared. Let's revisit our learning targets for this PLO. Take some time to read them. Before you pause this recording to watch this video, What Does Decoding Mean in Phonics Teaching by Wiley Blevins, I just want to point out that he discusses not only decoding, but he discusses encoding, writing, and repeated readings. It all goes together. You now may pause to watch the video. So in closing, Barbara Foreman says, the value of systematic phonics instruction is improving decoding skills, which only indirectly improves comprehension by making decoding more accurate and eventually more efficient. Those indirect effects will only get you so far in terms of understanding complex text. Building children's proficiency in language and their knowledge of the world are important to the broader goal of improving reading comprehension. Now that you have worked through the inquiries in this PLO, take some time to make an action plan. There is a link to the action plan on this slide and on your digital handout. Be sure to check out these great resources as you continue on your professional development journey. The University of Florida's website offers fabulous resources for teachers and families, and many more resources about remote learning. Some additional articles are linked here. Please note that the South Carolina Department of Education is offering the virtual book study series, Making Sense of Phonics. The link is provided on this slide and your digital handout. Thank you for taking the time to view this module in an effort to continuously improve literacy for the students of South Carolina. Please reach out to Dr. Quincy Moore or Marie Gibbons with any comments or questions that you may have. Now that you have completed the phonics module, we know as educators you are committed to developing, implementing, and enhancing effective literacy instruction in your district or school.